Hi, everybody. It's Tim Mangan. I heard there was some interest in my getting a session together, so not as entirely well planned out as it would have been. I was out on the golf course this morning, by the way. That is our last day of golf season here in Massachusetts. So I did get a few holes in today, but we got a few things that try to catch you up in terms of MSIX and what's going on. And of course, I do a bunch of books, but we have a new book that came out yesterday called the MSIX Packaging Fundamentals. It's written by a team of 3 of us. So this is a free ebook. It's available to the community. You can pick that up off a link, either off of my website or from advancedinstaller.com. They helped fund the creation of the book. Bogdan is one of their managers there, and he and I, along with Kevin Kaminsky, my old partner, put this book together and really go through the full set of fundamentals. You know, Bogdan has the background of building tools for developers to build MSIX packages. I've been doing a lot of work in terms of the conversion of existing applications into MSIX packages. And Kevin's been doing a lot of work with both Config Manager and Intune and deploying packages. And they're just starting to get into the point of doing some things with MSIX there as well. But as together, we made a good team. It's almost a 200-page book. And we've really kind of dived through and provided new folks a way to quickly get up to speed. And for those that have been playing with MSIX for a while, really clarify some of the things that have changed over time and that you might not have quite understood in terms of the fundamentals. So that's now available to you. Of course, when we talk about MSIX, we really talk about 3 different things. We talk about it being a developer model, a replacement for the MSI for software vendors to deliver software to you. And that's something that is very much still a work in progress and Microsoft is working towards. I do have some good news on that front in terms of the way that Microsoft has been approaching this to try to encourage them to do this in the future. It's also this delivery format and a runtime environment where these applications run inside a container. Not unlike app virtualization, but a much stricter container than what we're used to with technologies like Microsoft AppV. In terms of the IT Pro, this is kind of the way I look at the benefits for MSIX today. Right now, it's really just a new option. You still have your existing options. You can still deploy the applications to traditional ways as MSIs. AppV is still a great technology. I think it's still better than either MSI or MSIX in terms of delivering applications, in terms of the way that it can do a lot of automatic remediation for applications. But MSIX is coming, and it's this new option. It's not a bad idea to start to get used to it, because you're going to have to learn quite a bit. It's not just the packaging, you're also going to get applications from vendors. So you're going to be forced into MSIX in the long term. So anytime that you can spend at this point figuring out the basics of how the technology is working, as well as the operational aspects of how do we deploy it, how do we debug it, what does the help desk have to learn to be able to handle applications running in these containers, and how do they do their debugging? Because all of these things change with MSIX, and getting on board a little bit sooner, not saying take everything and move over into that environment, but getting a few applications across the wall and start playing with them in that fashion really does make sense for you in the long term. Now, there is an item on that slide that I put a little bit in gray about better security. MSIX is not a security product, but the fact that we are running these things in the container does improve the security of your systems. One of the great things with MSIX is that you install and everything really gets captured in terms of the changes and tied to that environment, not unlike the way AppV does. And we never really called AppV a security product either for the same purpose. The term that I'm using these days when I talk about the existing applications that we have and getting them converted over into MSIX format, though, is this application fidelity. It's really the idea that if you have an option to deliver the existing MSI to your end users today, and you could repackage it and deliver it through MSIX, would you do that? Are you losing any fidelity in that application? Are you losing a few of the shell extensions that you might have users that are used to with a right click on a file and it just doesn't quite show up for that particular app with MSIX. Those are the kind of things that are keeping me very busy trying to figure out of how can we get the best application fidelity with these applications, and how do we go about measuring it and figuring all of that out. So in terms of the kind of issues we normally see with MSIX, this is sort of the quick list of the kinds of issues that we run into that we can address today. And the way that we address them with MSIX is that we would take our package and we would add in this thing called the package support framework as a way to do that. The way the package support framework works is that it's really an intercept that sits in place between the application code and where it calls Windows API calls. And so we use detours, the same technology used in AppV, and we make changes to those calls to fix up the application to get it to work in this kind of environment. I do some reporting through a website that I have called MSIX, the number 6, conf.com. And in January each year, I release the MSIX report card that kind of provides a snapshot of where we are at that point. I will probably have another one in January. It might get pushed to February. We'll see how things go this year. I have a lot of testing to do that I haven't really started yet. But in terms of what we see out of those results, if we take a look at the typical applications that enterprises have, we see about 20% of the applications work fine in MSIX without the package support framework, and the others need some help. And of those, about half of those, we have fixes in the MSIX through the PSF for things that we see in those applications, and about half of those remaining ones we don't. Now, for the ones that are in that fix available, that doesn't mean that those applications are going to work with the package support framework. That just means the first set of problems we saw with the application are things that we have fixes for. But once we fix those, there may well be some things behind that. And in fact, that's kind of what we found with that. We typically found that the fixes that we had were fixing only a small subset of the applications to be able to get that full fidelity and deliver the same app out to users that they're used to seeing in the past. Within the package support framework this year, I've added a lot of code into that. So that's an open source thing that Microsoft created, and I'm a primary contributor to that. And I've added some new types of fix-ups to help expand the number and types of applications that we can deploy out there. The way that we use the package support framework is if we're using the Microsoft packaging tool to capture the application. We use another free tool of mine that's also up in the Microsoft Store, which is the same place you get the Microsoft packaging tool. It's called the PSF tooling. And that helps you to inject and configure the package support framework into your package as you're going through that packaging process. In terms of the amount of work to get an application ready, I threw this chart together for a different group. And I kind of showed how I view it in terms of how much time and effort it is to get a large number of applications working. And from an MSI and AppV is really, because of a lot of the remediations it does, it's usually a little bit quicker. But of course, there are some applications that we can never really get to with AppV. With MSIX, it's kind of like this. There are some apps that are really easy. And once you get past that first step, if you're not one of those apps, then you got to bring in the package support framework. And that's a lot more work than AppV, and is probably equivalent to MSI and possibly even more. But there's a whole bunch of apps that we just quite can't do it all yet, no matter how much time we spend. And that's where this effort is going. We're intending to improve the way this curve looks, and ideally we'd like it to end up looking much more like that AppV curve over time. All right, so in terms of the latest test results, these are the unofficial results. I did some testing this summer in preparation for the retest that I'll be doing in December and January. But I take a look at a whole bunch of applications. My current set is about 65 apps. The results from AppV, you can see here that for those apps, we're seeing almost complete compatibility with AppV with those applications. As we take a look at those with MSIX, without the package support framework, when we started doing the first round of testing almost 2 years ago, we saw about 20% compatibility. Microsoft has made some changes, so as long as you're up to the 2004 version of the OS or later, that's getting closer to about 30%. I don't think there's anything in the 20H2 OS that's really going to affect that number, but I haven't really done detailed testing against it. just a few snapshots, a little testing here and there, and I haven't really seen anything that I think really affects those results. As we bring in the package support framework, last spring I was looking at results around here where we were looking at just under 40%. That's what led me to add a number of new fix types into the package support framework. And the latest testing that I completed a full round on, we were at about 50%. And where I believe we'll be at the end of the year is going to be somewhere close to the 60% mark in terms of compatibility. So we're certainly making progress with MSIX as we move forward, but there's still a lot more work to go. My efforts at this point have stopped trying to improve this further beyond that 60% mark, but try to make the process easier. So we've been putting some things in PSF tooling to sort of automate the process of helping you figure out what fixes you need to put in place. And I've also begun work on a new tool, which will be more like an external editor, kind of like my TM Edit program that we would just package up, not worry about the package support framework. And then with a full package available, be able to do much better job of analyzing the application and putting the fixes in place for you. Okay, MSIX app attach, I'm just going to skip completely talking about because I know Christian is talking about it tomorrow. But I did do a little bit of performance testing in terms of the publishing time. So the idea that we go into a non-persistent machine, the user logs in, and we now want to bring those packages together. This testing was done with pre-release versions of all of the software, so I'm sure the numbers will get better over time than what you see here. But when you hear everyone talking about how fast MSIX app attach is, they're really talking about the traditional install of the MSIX package versus app attach. If we look at these numbers here of AppV 5.0 or 5.2, I guess we would call it today, AppV 5 versus app attach right now, you can see app attach is still a lot slower in that publishing. And I remember how much noise a lot of the customers were making because AppV 5 was slower than AppV 4.6. So they've still got some work to do in that area, and I know they have some plans to do that. And it'll be interesting to see now that the release is becoming available, have they addressed any of that immediately, or is that still going to be futures and they're going to have to improve that over time? This is a kind of a breakdown from that testing of where that time is being spent. They are going to do some work in terms of the VHD mounting and move to CIFS, which should improve this a little bit, not that much. It's really this package manager piece right here in terms of the preparation to do the final registration piece is the area that I think they have to attack the most if they really want to improve that performance. I also took a little bit of time at taking a look at the launch time of an application after the publishing was in place. And MSIX and MSIX app attach actually looked really good in terms of those numbers. Better than AppV, not quite as good as a native MSI of the same application, but not bad at all. So I was very happy with those results. This is the big piece for me, though, in terms of Microsoft's strategy and why MSIX is going to win, is Microsoft has really been listening to developers and trying to do a better job of helping them build software that'll run in MSIX using a lot of the pieces that they've had in the past. So previously, they really had to work vertically in terms of one of these three bottles you see here. They would have an unmanaged C or C++ code written in WinForms, or they'd have a .network framework application, or they'd have this Windows Universal app. And the user interfaces and the Windows APIs underneath were all completely constrained that you had to stay within that one model. And what Microsoft is doing, at least theoretically, is they're breaking these things apart and they're allowing the developers to be able to build applications that include user interface components from a mixture of these things, as well as from any of those places calling any of the other APIs. So as long as they package it all up in an MSIX package, they can get away with this. And that means that they can start taking their existing applications and bringing in some of those components of the newer things Microsoft is developing, because everything that they're doing as new for developers is really on that right-hand side. But now they can start taking advantage of it. Or they could just build their entire UI based on WinUI 3 and still make use of some of the older components that they'd written in terms of things like COM components and things like that, and to be able to bring those in. And they hadn't been able to do that in the past. It's been one of those cases where they had to make a huge leap to move to this new containerized technology space. But now they're actually going to be able to bring all of these things together. WinUI 3 is still not quite released yet. They've been talking about it for over a year now, but they're really close, and we expect to see that released here this fall at some point is the best guess here. So I think I'm at my 15 minutes. So I'm Tim Mangan. I'm happy to take any questions. I don't see anything up there in the Discord now that I finally got attached, but you can go ahead and pop any questions in there and I'll try to answer them if I can. Ooh, there's something here in the chat.
Yeah, Tim, you do have some time left. I mean, if you want 10 more minutes, you can do so. If anyone else has any questions right now, do ask. Otherwise, Tim, if you have some more you want to tell right now, do.
Sure, I can always talk. I've gotten good at talking.
Talk about your class.
I talk about our classes, yeah. So our training, it's sort of been interesting for us. So the trainings that we do have always been this in-person event. And so originally here in the US, and then the last few years, we've been doing a lot of trainings out in Europe, the Netherlands and Switzerland in particular. And so we would go to a site and I'd bring my equipment in and we'd set the whole thing up and we'd do our trainings there. And of course, last spring, that just became impossible for us. And for a while, I was actually debating whether or not I was retired and didn't know it, because we just couldn't do anything. And I really didn't think I could make my classes work in a remote situation, given the way that we run them. But I worked hard at it, and we did try a few classes out, and they worked pretty well. So we've gone to remote training now. We'll go back to in-person when we can, but it's not clear when that's going to be at this point due to the pandemic. But the remote classes work really well. We do use GoToMeeting. The other version, this is GoToWebinar, but the GoToMeeting turns out to work really well for us because we can easily do the screen sharing. And what we've really done in those classes is the class covers both AppV and MSIX packaging, so we cover both of those technologies. And we took the 40-hour class, and rather than try to run it into 5 days, we run it over a 10-day period. So people work 4 hours a day, gives them an opportunity to do some other things. And no one really wants to be on a webinar for a full 8 hours straight anyway. And that's worked out really well with the students. And we really have found that we're able to do many of the things that we can do in person. We've had to try to learn how to engage with the customers a little bit different. So the people who are in the class, to try to get them working together in a physical classroom. It was very easy for me to walk around the room as someone had a problem and draw in the people sitting next to them to help them solve the problem. It's a little harder to do that over the web, but we've managed to do that as long as we have the class sizes down enough. We can still pull that off, and I think everyone has a pretty good experience out of it. So we do have classes we're scheduling now starting for 2021. Looks like we'll have one in March in the Netherlands. And I'm not sure in Switzerland. We thought it was going to be in April, but it looks like it's probably going to be June. We're still trying to resettle on what a date would be for that. We'll schedule some more things as we get an opportunity as well. So, you know, folks have customers that are interested. We do run those classes, the remote ones we're doing in the afternoon time frame for you, because I'm here in the US, so that works out well. And then our US classes would probably be more like in the evening. So we've had some people from Europe attend those as well. It surprised me because we try to make sure that we're late enough to cover the West Coast here without forcing people to get up too early.